Welcome everybody tonight. My name is Barbara Grosh and I'm the Director of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters in Rochester. And the League is an organization that's 101 years old, and we're all about getting people to vote, right? We worked for 70 years to get women the right to vote, and then we turned around and started trying to help them to vote, to know how to vote, to get registered, to learn the issues, to be effective advocates. So that's what we're still doing 101 years later. And I'm happy to welcome you to this fourth in our series of webinars that are designed to help people get ready to vote locally. We had good turnout in Monroe County last year for the presidential elections, but we know that turnout is usually lower for local elections, which is really not the way it should go. And now I am going to introduce to you Marie Millord, and she is going to give a welcome on behalf of our co-sponsors, the Zetas. So take it away, Marie.
Thank you, Barbara. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marie Millord, and I am humbled to be a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Psi Omega Zeta chapter. Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated was founded on the campus of Howard University on January 16, 1920. Our sorority's international programs serve to empower people from all walks of life through mind, body, and spirit, while directly affecting positive change through the different programs and services that we do in the community. Our local chapter here, Psi Omega Zeta chapter, will be celebrating our 10 years anniversary on June 24th, 2021. And our members continue to be committed to service initiatives and opportunities to educate our community. Some of our chapter members are joining us tonight. We are very excited to be partnering with another hardworking, community-based, nonpartisan organization, the League of Women Voters, Rochester metropolitan area, to have discussions on the much-needed topics such as the one we're having tonight. So on behalf of my chapter presidents, Joyce Aqua, on behalf of my sorority sisters of Psi Omega Zeta chapter, we would like to thank you for joining us. We would like to thank the board of directors, especially Mrs. Barbara Gosh, for collectively planning and partnering with us, and also for our sister Myra for helping make this happen. So again, thank you everyone for joining us, and have a pleasant evening. We bring you.
Thank you, Marie. All right, I'm going to bring on our panelists for tonight. So Jill, Ricardo, and Reenah, if you want to turn your cameras on, that'd be great. So let me introduce people a little bit. You can unmute yourself too if you want. So let's talk about how we came up with this topic. Ricardo helped me plan this series. So we started off with just a big overview of what's on the ballot this year, because a lot of people don't really even know that. We talked about the mayor and the city council and the school board and the county ledge and what they all do and how important they are to our lives. And then we picked up a couple of individual issues that we thought were real important to quality of life here in Rochester. And then I thought we'd end up with, why do we do it? All of us on this call spend a lot of time doing civic activism. And so I just wanted to have a kind of a rah, it's worth the time and the effort kind of discussion with you guys and hear from all of you about why we do what we do. So we've got Ricardo Adams is going to help me moderate here tonight. And Ricardo is a member of the school board and also just a general all-around activist. I see him all around town. And Reenah Golden is especially an activist in the arts area. She's the founder of the Black Box Avenue Theater, and I know you do a ton of other stuff that I can't list, but you can feel free to refer to any of your different activities, all of you. And then Jill Paperno is, Jill's a lawyer. She's in the public defender's office, but I first met Jill in 2008 in Cleveland when she was leading a group of lawyers that were making sure that the election in 2008 went right and there weren't any violations that were keeping people from exercising their rights to vote. And so I know she does all kinds of activism, maybe most of it legal, but I don't know enough about Jill to even say if that's all true. So that's who we are. So let me kick it off with this question. So we at the League of Women Voters spend a lot of time trying to get people to register to vote. And sometimes when we do that, quite often, in fact, we get people who say, oh, I don't want to do that. It's not worth the time. Nothing's ever going to change. Even if they sound good now, if they get elected, they'll just be like all the rest of them. And really a great deal of discouragement about whether it's possible to make social change or not. So let me throw it to each of you in turn and ask, what do you say when you hear, because I'm sure you've heard these things too. What do you say to people who have these views? So Reenah, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, first off, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm really interested, in this discussion also hopefully it'll be taking place on Facebook too, because I know a lot of folks, I would like to see people, just chiming in. So hello to everybody in the Facebook world too, because I'm always very interested in what folks are saying, and not just hearing myself. I like to respond and be interactive as well. But I say first off, I listen when I hear that. And secondly, I actually agree. I don't think voting alone can change anything. I don't think it can anything except the faces of those we expect to take the lead on getting the work done. But it's not until we understand that we are the ones who must hold them accountable, in pushing and push that work forward, that anything changes, so that's kind of where I come at it, from this idea of really listening and understanding that. I think I come from a family that votes. I come from a tradition, of voting and understanding the historical context of, what it means to actually have the right to vote and exercise that right. But I also, I'm also someone who can be a bit cynical about the process and about the things that need to be changed in this whole political landscape, and also in our, our current system, voting and electing officials, feeds into this system that, that I don't have a lot of faith in right now. So, so that's where I would start. I do start in a place of, somewhat agreement, but also just this idea that's only about the idea that that's not the thing that will change, anything unless we understand our role, in holding folks accountable, and also pushing the work forward, setting those agendas, and really being, really vocal, but also really active and activated about the things that we want to see change, and the things that we want to see, built on, when we see that some things that are working.
Thank you. You said some great things there that I'm going to make notes on so I can come back, but I want to touch on everybody else before they forget the question. So Ricardo, why don't you go next? What do you have to say on this issue?
It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our change. I feel real strongly about voting. Voting does work. It's a slogan out there that people like to believe that it doesn't matter. But when we take an honest look over the past few years, voting has made a difference. we were able to get Barack Obama in office. We've been able to get the first Black female mayor in office here. We were able, voting got Trump in the office. And you know, so voting does make a difference.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying any of them were the greatest, but this did happen, and wouldn't have happened without the vote. And I'm a witness to voting make a difference by me being in office. It's incredible that I've reached this point. And I believe that if we do vote, if we all came out and vote, I feel strongly, everybody would be advocating for our issues. The Republicans, the independents, and everybody would be advocating for our issues because that's what they want, our vote. They get away with thinking that we're not going to come out. That's why a lot of times some of them don't care about our votes. But if we come out in them numbers, they will be supporting our cause. And I'm going to not take up the whole floor.
Okay.
Pass it on.
Jill, your turn.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, and I am honored to be among this group. So thank you very much for having me tonight. We talked about, the dog's poking the door open, of course. We talked about, or you just talked about us meeting in 2008 in Cleveland, and that wasn't my first trip to Cleveland. So after the 2000 debacle, the presidential debacle, in 2004, I went to Cleveland to do voter protection as a lawyer. And you know, we got trained on what we could do, and we were going to make every provisional ballot count. We can talk about provisional ballots later. And we were going to be there, you know, the front line fighting for people's ability to vote. And I remember election day in 2004, it was pouring rain, and I was stationed at a place in the city in Cleveland, and it was a predominantly Black neighborhood. And one thing after another went wrong, and it was the voting machines weren't working. The lines were growing. It took hours for people standing out in the rain to be able to move even just a few feet. And then they would get to the machines, and the machines were just not functioning. And we were given the phone numbers and how to, you know, remedy these problems. We were supposed to call the Secretary of State's office, or what they call the boiler room, where the lawyers were working, and we couldn't get through to the Secretary of, it was Kenneth Blackwell at the time. We couldn't get through to one number after another. People were running around trying to fix things, and it wasn't working. And it was a deliberate effort to try and thwart voters' ability to express themselves. So that, it's interesting because I think all of us probably have a bit of cynicism and a bit of optimism. I think a lot of activists are cynical about a lot of things, like this may not work, or we've seen a lot of bad stuff. But you're also optimistic because you have to be optimistic to keep doing these things. So that was, you know, kind of peak cynicism and optimism for me. And I felt really committed to standing up and trying to help people vote. And it also was a, you know, kind of a shocker for me. I'm a New Yorker. I'm a privileged white woman in New York. So when I go to vote, I don't wait on lines. I just kind of walk in, I cast my ballot, I get my cute little sticker, and I smile and I walk out. And that's not the way it is for many, many people across this country, and especially in communities of color. And so, you know, watching that in real time in Cleveland in 2004 jolted me awake. And I'd been doing activist things for years before that, but on voting rights, that really jolted me. And then, so we went in 2008, and President Obama had a machine. It was the most remarkable thing because they had anticipated every possible problem. And so they had entertainment out on the lines. They had people serving food, which is now being made illegal in some of the states under these new voter restriction acts. They had people bringing water. They had told us to do certain things. So I brought chairs for people to sit in. I brought t-shirts because if you wear a t-shirt that advertises a candidate, you may not get into the polls, and they're not going to tell you that till you're at the door after you've waited. So I brought white t-shirts so people could just throw them on over their clothes. And so, you know, we learned these things, but he had this incredible machine. They would take every hour, ask you, okay, who's voted in the precinct? And you get it off the door, call in, who hasn't voted. 10 minutes later, you would see his team walking up and down the street, knocking on doors to get people to get out and vote. So that was kind of the best experience in voting that I could have seen. And I think it's so critically important because even just in this last election, there's so many things I could talk about, but just talking about now how much the rate of illness has gone down across this country from COVID, I attribute directly to a change in leadership in this country. And there are so many other things, but I think that's just something we're feeling every day. So I think voting is really important. And as Reenah was saying, though, once we have voted and once we have people in office, we have to make sure that we hold them accountable. And that's all sorts of other kinds of activism, of, you know, making sure our voices are heard and working to have other people's voices heard. So I don't know if I completely answered your question, but that's some of my perspective on it.
It's really good. So, I mean, we can all share examples of things that we've seen change as a result of who's in office, so that made a difference. So since we've already mentioned Cleveland, I'll just say, when I was in high school, I was a debater and we were debating something about environmental policy. And at that time, you know, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland caught fire every now and then. And then we got an EPA and we got a Clean Water Act, and the rivers are a lot cleaner, and we've got endangered animals coming back. We got more birds now than we did when I was young because we got rid of DDT. I mean, there's a million different things, and we can, I'm sure you all have your favorite list of victories that you've seen. A few weeks ago on here, we had a historic one because we were here to talk about voting rights for people with felony histories. And the day before our webinar, the governor signed the bill that had just been passed to restore voting rights to people on parole. So, you know, the changes keep coming. I want to go back to one of the things Reenah said when you were talking. So you said voting alone does very little, which I totally agree with. And I'm glad you mentioned that you just listen when people start on this line of thought. Because I mean, I get it too. I can see why people think that way. And you should never poo-poo their lived experience that voting does very little. But you said voting alone does very little. So you're really saying that you have to do a lot more than voting. So voting is like a ticket to get in the state fair, but the whole state fair is there once you're inside, and you got to do something there.
Well, I'll say, I didn't say voting alone does very little. I said it alone can't change anything, right? And so, and I think there really is a difference. And I think the examples that we're talking about, also, like, those are, you know, these are we can all name of things that have changed and change that has happened. That really speaks to the agendas that have been set and how those agendas were set. And that's the accountability piece that I'm really talking about. So and often, in order to be, you know, I think for me, integrity is really actually saying, in many cases, I did vote and put you in, you know, in office, right? And so I do have expectations, but even if I did not, I still would expect, as a community of you know, of civically engaged folks who believe in that duty that you know, Ricardo was just talking about, that Assata Shakur quote, is like, it really is our duty, but it also is about impressing upon those elected officials that they have a duty to us, right? And also that this, you know, and being really diligent about continuously setting that agenda, you know, pushing forward that work, you know, and I don't think it's that candidate or that elected official alone that could ever make these types of changes that we're talking about happen, right? But yes, I definitely agree that it matters. It definitely matters, because there's going to be somebody in that office, in that seat after that election, you know, so it absolutely matters. And whether it's the candidate I voted for or not, whether it's the candidate I voted for or not, does not change the fact that I have expectations about what they do in that position and in that seat. And I want that, I want us to always keep that same energy as we, after after election day,
Mhm. So you talk about holding elected officials responsible. So let's talk about how that is done. You all are active in doing that. So just share some stories. So how do you go about doing that? And Ricardo, you might have some stories about how it looks from the other side of the table, since you are an elected official. Let me interrupt you before you start. I think I forgot to mention that if those who are on Zoom want to raise questions, they can just put them in the Q&A box. I don't think the chat is activated, but the Q&A box will work. And if you're on Facebook, you can put questions in the comments and we'll ask them there. Okay, go ahead. So how do you go about it, Reenah? Tell me some of the things you do to keep elected officials responsible, because a lot of people don't have a clue how they would do that. So share some ideas.
I thought Ricardo was about to tell us a little bit about the other side of the table. Because you're on both sides. You've been on both sides, of the table. I'm gonna defer. I want to hear some of that before I start talking again.
Is he frozen? Oh, no.
No, I'm frozen. But I am in shock with that, because this is how it looks on the other side of the table. Like, I have to really go into deep thought before I say something. Everything, I have to censor everything I say. And even when I censor it and say something, they pick it apart. It's like, I'm gonna be honest. Let me be honest here and tell you, for me, it's like, this is the most disgusting experience I've ever had in my life, and I can't wait till my term is over. That's what I need to say. I say that honestly. But we have to just keep pressing on. You have to keep pressing on and demand honesty and demand honesty and demand that people listen to you. You know what I'm saying? I've even on occasion gotten so many emails with so many lies and that I probably missed reading some good emails, some good significant emails. You get yourself into a moment, and so people have to just keep pressing me, going at every angle. If I give you my number, you need to call it. Don't let me just tell you you can call me and then you don't. You have to really hold my feet to the fire, because it's so easy to get caught up into just being careful. And being careful ain't what people really elected me to be. It's really bad. So I better let somebody go on before I might have to step down from my position instead of finishing out.
No, we value your work. We value your service. In that position, Ricardo, is not for everyone. And I appreciate it. And I think you touched on a big part of what I'm a direct person, and so when you talk about having somebody's phone number and using it, ask any elected official that has been in office while I've been an adult, and that's from, the mayor to to city council, to assemblymen and, folks who, if I really believe in indirectly, in being in direct contact first and foremost, that that shouldn't be a privileged position, having someone's phone number or having access to someone. I don't believe that should be a privileged position. It's not something that I approach it as like I'm special, that I have that, that I have that direct line to folks. But I say that's where I start, is making sure that I am, I reach out directly and say, when I have an issue, when I have a concern, when I want to get something onto the agenda, I reach out directly. I think the other piece to that, is also about staying aware, making sure that it's not, I will say it's not easy, because a lot of the way this system is structured, I believe it's really convoluted and bureaucratic for a reason. It's meant to, get folks, cause people to get discouraged and, and feel left out and feel like they don't know what they don't know, and so maybe they should just be quiet, and those kind of things. So I believe in asking a lot of questions. Even if I think I know the answer to it, I'm going to ask it, anyway. I kind of that's one of those things where I want to put my pride aside from the start and say, when I'm in those rooms, in those spaces, when I hear something that I'm not familiar with, or like I said, even if I think I know, but it, feels like they're talking over, somebody's talking over your head, you go to, a meeting or a hearing or, public, speak out time, they're talking over your head or using acronyms and, and things like that, that's something that I point out. If there's no format to be able to interject, because that happens, because that's how the system structures itself sometimes, so that there's no space for you to be able to raise your hand and say, hold on, I, the public, have a question. I, the public, have something to say. It's structured in that way. If there's not, that's why I believe that those direct contacts matter, so those are the things where I will text, call, email, and say, there were a whole bunch of things that I just heard, in this public meeting that directly I'm directly impacted by, and so or the youth and families that I serve are directly impacted by, and so you need to break that down for me, and it does, it's not easy. It does take diligence on your part, I definitely have probably been seen as as pushy in some in some
Get out of here.
I'm definitely somebody who's like, yo, nope, I do have another question. Oh, nope, I do have something else to say. Or hello, you did not return my phone call. And so I hear you, Ricardo, when you say sometimes you're bogged down. And again, that's how this system works, and some of it is by design, some of it is intentional. You might be bogged down with email after email, phone call after phone call, voicemails that, a never ending list of it. So, so I am that person who's going to come back to you and say, not make the assumption, oh, well, they don't have time for me, or they don't want to hear from me. I don't really care about that. I'm gonna keep reaching out and making sure that, this is my second or my third, phone call, my email, my second email that I've sent, and I didn't hear back from you. And often that also involves, looking for the rest of that team, because it's not one individual responsible. So I'm not somebody who I don't believe in this idea of like, these sort of allegiances where you only work with this person or that person or the other. All of y'all are my elected officials. All of y'all are accountable, to me and, and my community. So, yep, if I have something to say, I might be saying it to, other folks as well. And hopefully y'all are working behind the scenes together to make those kinds of things happen, even though I know that's not, realistic. Sometimes that's not what's happening, but that doesn't change the fact that that's my expectation, is that it gets on. And one key thing about that really is pressing on. I say that all the time. It's a hashtag that I use, we press on. And it's because we have to. It's
important that you put me on blast when I just say anything out my mouth. Do not let me tell you I'll talk to you later on the down low and straighten it out. No, it needs to be, I need to straighten it out publicly, like the statement I made. Like if I said the sun turned green today, I don't need to explain that to you on the down low. I need to explain that to everybody. And you need to put me on blast and keep putting me on blast until the media pick it up or something. Don't let me just keep saying anything, responding to stuff in any type of way, and then sometimes not responding. Don't let me get away with not responding to something this quite obviously needs a response.
I agree.
We have to, that's why I'm so glad the work that you're doing, you're involving these young folks, Reenah, and they are assertive enough to not accept the old ways of accepting stuff. And, so I thank you for that.
Jill, do you have anything you want to chime in here?
I just listening to Ricardo and Reenah speak and thinking about Ricardo as an elected leader saying, hold me accountable, tell me these things. I mean, how often do you hear that? And that, I think, is one of the perils that we face with a lot of elected leaders is they want to hold that position and they start losing sight, if they had values that were important, of those values. And he's saying, like, I can't wait to be done with this because I have my values and I am tired of having to give up or fight to express my values. And, I think that's what we want elected leadership to be thinking, thinking that way. Like, my values are more important to me than this position. And that's what we don't see. And that's what, you see so many elected leaders being fearful and not fighting for their values, instead fighting to hold on to the job. And it's backwards. So
they talk about making policy or making legislation as like making sausage. And, that's a tough and not always pleasant job. And I do appreciate all the elected officials who do that work, because I from what I've heard, I'm not willing to do it myself. So I got to mention some other ways that we hold elected officials responsible. So like the League of Women Voters, we have positions on a lot of different issues. And every year we make appointments with all our Assembly and Senate people from New York's, from our districts in New York. And we meet with them. So we have a whole team that researches what the bills are that are out there that affect the issues that we care about. And they feed us a lot of information. So we come in as very well-informed citizens. So, most people are not, frankly, going to be as active as someone like Reenah is, and she can call up all the elected officials and get their phone numbers. And but that's a good reason to join a group that works in an area that you're interested in, so that you come in with a little bit of mass, like you're speaking for more than yourself, and they have to take you more seriously if you represent a group, and the group has built credibility in an area that they work on. There's a lot of environmental groups, there's education groups, there's interest groups are a real thing in politics, and it's a good idea to join groups that can work on issues together. Because it's a lot of work, frankly, to be a really well-informed person. And it's also, it's a lot of work to stay on top of who's doing what. I mean, I've been admiring, like later this month, I'm going to have to go to the polls and vote in a judge primary. And like, how do I honestly know who to vote for? It's really hard to do that research. And the city council, there's like 15 candidates for 5 seats. So how do you really tell? Like, you can listen to what people say, and some people will say something you disagree with, so you might scratch them off, but other people will say something that sounds kind of good to you, but you don't actually know whether they can follow through and what they really do when you're not looking at them. So there's just a lot to be really informed, and that's where groups that work on something consistently over time can really be better informed and help voters understand who's really moving the ball forward on various issues.
So there, in the last several years, people have really taken advantage of social media in all sorts of ways that can be positive, in addition to all the horrible effects that social
Yeah.
media can have. And when you talk about joining groups, there are little bites you can take if you're not up for, taking on a big thing yourself and going, and being a leader of a group or someone who is meeting all the time. There are still the small things when you're following a group, when maybe it's letter writing or calling your senator, your state senator, your federal representative. And groups can guide you in those ways if you find a group that is something that expresses your values. And then, there's all sorts of other stuff you can do on social media. We share, I often share articles, but also then encourage people to engage in actions. We formed some groups on social media over the years. We formed one that helped us defeat what we named the annoyance law, which was a terrible law that would have given police tremendous discretion to just, anytime they were mad at someone, essentially arrest them. And we formed a group and fought that largely with social media and a campaign there. We did another one when we wanted to support elections of Democrats in Georgia. Rochester for Georgia was the name of a group I formed with a friend. And we got 10,000 postcards out the door or more. I mean, it was just, there's a way of building community there that is new and creative, and you don't have to do it all. You can say, I'm going to do 10 postcards, and you've contributed to that effort.
Exactly. So if we all do 10 postcards, it matters. I mean, this is what I remember from the Obama campaign in 2008. He was getting $10 and $20 donations from millions of people, and that actually adds up to real money. So he didn't start out as sounding like someone who was going to have a lot of money, but he just blew past everyone else, because actually that's a lot of power if you have a lot of people. I'm glad you mentioned social media. I find that a really useful place to learn, because I can throw out a question and say, I don't have any experience with this or that person. Does anyone have any views? And usually in my social media group, somebody will tell me something interesting and useful that helps me sort of get off knowing nothing to knowing a little bit and open up some good conversations. And certainly it's usually more informative than like the news media around Rochester, which really it's very hard to learn enough to be a good voter if you're relying on that.
I want to say I'm glad you brought up, Jill, the idea of forming groups and even in these informal ways, like we all would have thought social media or Facebook would have been, because I might have to push back a little bit on this idea that, Barbara, of what you spoke about when you said credibility of organizations that have been in existence for however long they have, et cetera. Because we also know historically all voices have not been heard in those so-called credible groups and organizations and special interests groups, advocacy groups that exist. And so what we are witnessing, and I have to say, I'm really inspired by folks who are entering from a different door, and that door might be social media. It may be a Facebook door where they saw some good things being posted and found their way to this group, and then found their place to be able to start advocating for change in a way that really does break up some of the status quo that that has existed and that hasn't got us very far too. I'm not being critical of anyone in particular, any group in particular, but I am noting especially for Black and brown folks, for BIPOC folks, for disabled folks, for queer folk, those of us who have just been completely non-existent, our voices in many of these groups, and that has slowed down progress in a big way. in a huge way. It has resulted in progress in some ways, but it still, you know, has left us in a position where there are still the marginalized and deeply oppressed, you know, in our society, which isn't good for any of us, right? So I am very much so inspired by the idea of, you know, joining, but also about, you know, this sort of organic co-creation of special interest groups that social media has allowed for, you know, as well as just activism on the streets has allowed for as
I
well.
was going to go there too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, last summer was just a total ferment of creativity and network building and new alliances popping up with demonstrations all summer long. And I mean, some of them just really impressed the heck out of me. You know, Black Lives Matter was downtown all summer, and then there were all these Black Lives Matter in the suburbs. And I never thought I would see, you know, white people in Pittsford and Parenton and Penfield having Black Lives Matter rallies. And yet they did, they came out, and nobody's looking to them to really be the movers and shakers, but their support is very important. And they demonstrated support in a visible way that can be seen by elected officials who need their votes to stay in office. And that's an important thing. Yeah. There can be high costs to that. The month of September in Rochester was quite the experience, right? Jill, I know you were busy as a lawyer taking statements, documenting all the police
Yeah.
brutality, I guess is the right word for it.
So what happened is, again, social media and having some friends, some like-minded friends, but as people were getting hurt and at the rallies and the demonstrations and hurt by police, I had reached out to friends just on Facebook saying, hey guys, any lawyers, you know, think we can do something about this? And so I had about 15 or 20 lawyer friends respond. And you certainly don't have to be a lawyer to be activist in any way. In fact, the best activists I know are not lawyers, but this was something that I felt like I could plug into. And so we started taking statements. We had people stationed down at the demonstrations and people were reaching out to me, and we took a lot of statements, and ultimately that became the basis for, or part of the basis for, the large class action that's going on in Rochester now against the police department. And so I guess another, you know, like when you talk about cynicism versus optimism, another piece of it is like, don't hold yourself back and think, oh, this will never work, so I'm not going to try. Just aim high and go for it. And, you know, we didn't know where that was going to lead us with taking statements. I took statements for 3 weeks. I spent all of Labor Day weekend taking statements from people, and my heart was breaking. And I wasn't even down there, but just talking to people about what they'd gone through. But we just kept plugging on, thinking, let's make this happen. Can we make this happen? And through some wonderful friends I have, we made it happen.
So I guess one lesson out of that story is don't be by yourself, right? If you hadn't called your friends, you would have felt like, oh, what can I do? And you wouldn't have done anything and nothing would have happened, right? It really takes people connecting with other people to make social change. I think that
I agree that really, really is important and helps, but sometimes you're out there by yourself first.
Well, yeah.
I've been in situations where, you know, I disagree with a policy that's been expressed in the legislature or something. So I'm trying to persuade people. So I write a legal memo, and that's just me. And then it takes off. And so, you know, I also like, don't sell your own power short. Just, it may not always go the way you want it to, but, you know, give yourself some opportunity to be out there and do it, even if you don't have the support of others right away. And I'm talking too much, so I want to back down for a second.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Sometimes you do have to, and often you have to step out, on faith, on your own, just on your own beliefs, your own values, and see that as, as your duty too. Again, everybody is going to do that. I would encourage folks to do that in ways that they are both comfortable and, slightly uncomfortable, with, until they do kind of build their, I think your tribe is important, is very much so important in that it is what gives us, strength, what gives us, the resilience that's necessary for the marathon, because it's not, a sprint. And also, and it also helps reinforce, this idea of community, of building community, and something that is a sustainable community, because we really, you cannot, do it alone, whether that be, again, these elected officials that sometimes we think, okay, they're supposed to do it, the mayor, you're supposed to do it, you're the mayor, you're a school board member, you're supposed to do this. Why haven't you fixed the schools, this district by now, Ricardo? But it's not, it's not, it's not work that we can do alone. But sometimes you do have to, don't be, I wouldn't say wait for everybody to be in agreement, before you step forward and and do what you got to do.
Yeah, it's important to know that change is never going to come quick enough. Never is it going to be big enough. And sometimes our efforts are just to hold the line to keep us from going backwards. We don't even try to make no progress. We're just trying to keep from going backwards. And we have to do this. We have to do this. And I'm like hopeful. I really am hopeful that the youth are ready for this long journey that they have. It ain't something that they're gonna come to terms with soon, because them either. But I am hopeful, and I know that we all need to do what we're doing, whether it's writing a legal note, or getting some kids to do a play at the corner of Avenue D, or just boycotting. We all need to keep doing everything. Everything has to stay on the table in order to move this stuff forward. And my saying always has been, I know people have a lot on their plate, but what I say is get a bigger plate.
Yeah, I'm glad you continue to talk about the youth. I'm really proud of them, and also really inspired by them. I'm inspired by your daughters, Ricardo. I'm inspired by these young people that even if they don't, they're not out in front, they are seeing themselves, and their contributions as valuable in this moment, right? And who knows what kind of seeds are being planted and what kind of seeds they're watering in themselves, right? By being present, and learning and using this thing, called the internet, to add to their own knowledge. Because I do believe, I feel like definitely the public schooling system does a horrible job of preparing citizens to be civically engaged and activated as agents of change. I know that all of my roles in the school district, as an educator, I've been infiltrating, trying to do that, because I could see where there really, there was a void, and where there really have been missing the mark in that. And I really shout out, those educators that were about it, and the ones that I work with, the ones that I haven't, who closed their doors of their classrooms and said, let me tell you what you really need to know, and what and how you really, bring about change, or asking for, or even more importantly, asking their ideas about really, bringing about change for their community. And even if that community started with that school and it went against, what the administration might have set forth as their plan. So I think, back to the idea of voting is only part of my activism, but it is a critical part. But I also think cultivating the next generation of voters, cultivating the next generation of elected officials, cultivating the next generation of activists is that's how, that's how those things go together for me, because it doesn't stop. And I also believe that we also are seeing, probably because of social media, and definitely what we even saw, with you referenced earlier, Jill, President Obama, the campaign to elect, Barack Obama, because I remember also being very, very heavily involved, but really on the ground, like working with youth, who are like, okay, let me look around and see who's about to turn 18, in these schools, in this school system, that turned into, that's one of those blessings and curses, those of our kids that, still hadn't graduated, by 18, 19, 20 years old, but often, like in that moment, that became an opportunity to say, hold on, like, here's some other things that we can be doing at this time to get you, to really, really get you prepared, not just to elect the first Black president, but get you prepared to join that, join the work, what happens next after, that election, and what that means in terms of the lifelong, fight for that kind of equity and change, right? So yeah, I definitely see how, with our young people, and really across the board, we need that new energy. We need that, just that stamina, everything, that fire that they bring. But I also see how that's something that also rejuvenates and feeds back into the core, right? Because, I mean, look at me, look at Ricardo, we're not done, we're not done. We're still out here in these streets, so we need that, I think we need that sort of multi-generational energy as well, pushing things forward, so that it isn't, and I don't like to make it easy for our politicians either. It used to be real easy. They could just cater to, the older folks, the folks of a certain income bracket, the homeowners, you could literally like peg who is the voter, who votes in local election. Now it really is anybody's game. So they really, should be paying attention to the idea that it's the least, it might be the person you least expect, to be casting that ballot, and also have, 4 more people in the car with them about to cast that same ballot too, and it may not look the same as it always has. And we've seen that in our local elections. We've seen that, as you mentioned, Ricardo, we've seen that, when we've elected the least typical, candidate, often that's happened, in our community. But at this point, I'll still stand by the idea that it's not enough just getting that person, elected, or changing the faces that are sitting in those seats, that are staring out at us from those seats.
And as an activist, one of the sayings that we always say is, ain't no power like the power of the people. The power of the people don't stop. So when we go to the polls and vote and we do our thing, it kind of is like an energy pill for us as an activist. It's proof that the power of the people does work. That's what it does. It shows us. And I hope it does that. It's getting ready to do that this month, one way or another. The power of the people not showing up, or the power of the people showing up. Either way, it's going to affect some stuff around this city, June 22nd. So voting is very critical. Like I say, it's sometimes just as an activist, I need to win a little battle just to keep me going. Sometimes I just need somebody to blow their horn when they're driving by. But sometimes I need to see somebody get in office that I voted for.
You know, one of the things,
Yeah.
one of the things I do if I'm about to speak is I'm always kind of gathering, like, what is it I should have with me? So I, grabbed my copy of the Constitution, and I grabbed my copy of Stacey Abrams, Our Time Is Now. And that's all about voting. And one of the things that she talks about is that, we sometimes tend to characterize things as in terms of we won or we lost. We won this election, we lost this election because we got enough votes to get that person in or not. But really, it's how many people have been mobilized and have gotten engaged, and they're now going to start moving and shaking and being involved in ways they weren't before. So it's not a, won or lost, one and done. It's a process. And I think that's part of where the optimists among us start saying, hey, this many more turned out, and this many more are now speaking out for this piece of legislation. Like, a lot of the groundswell of support for bail reform and for discovery reform and criminal justice, which is my field, was community groups. I was, listening to community groups, and part of them, like in New York City, we were doing all these phone meetings and stuff, and they were not lawyers. They were just community people who had decided these things needed to change, and they made it happen.
So a while ago, Reenah, you used the metaphor about it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But I wanted to say sometimes it's a relay, right? So sometimes you need a break so you can give the baton to someone else for a little while and take your break. And that's the power of groups and of having people to work with. So you don't get discouraged just because you're tired. You just know you need a break, and you'll be back.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
I've had discussions with friends who sometimes say, I feel guilty because I need to stop right now. And it's the same thing you're saying, Barbara. It's just, you're not stopping forever. You need a break, and you have to take care of yourself. And if we're handing off the baton to each other, or we're holding hands and joining as a team, other people can take over for a while. I've talked to friends about, like, they'll say, gee, I wish I were working on that issue you're working on. I said, look, you're working on that issue. I'm working on this. So you do my part there, and I'll do your part here. And we just all work together.
And that's critical. It's critical. Like, you're absolutely, like, burnout is real, this is definitely not for the faint of heart, but it is really, comes back to the tribe for me, is that it really is important to build your tribe, with folks who understand that part, that it's that yes, we all need breaks sometimes, or more importantly, that how much self-care is also, as Audre Lorde says, is an act of resistance as well, or is not, it's not a luxury, I might be mixing up two quotes, putting them together, but, I'm not quoting, I'm paraphrasing right now, but just that idea that, that is part of the revolution too. That is part of, of resistance too, not just killing yourself, in those moments. And it's hard, like for folks, those of us who have been doing this work, really, really doing this work, like for a long time, it is hard to, to step away for it, even for a second, because everything feels like a critical moment. Like everything feels like, okay, if I can just get this thing done, I'm gonna take a break after this. If I can just get this thing done. Okay, we're making progress here. We don't want to let up on it. Let's keep this progress going. Let's keep the numbers up. Let's keep the pressure on. you know, and so that's why it is absolutely imperative that, you know, we're building a tribe that really does understand what sustainability really looks like and how we have to have each other's back. We all, you know, we say we keep us safe, you know, and so, and it's not safe to be working at a pace where you believe that you are the only one that can do the work that you're doing in that moment, or else, you know, it all falls apart. That's not safe, you know, because you're gonna you know, you're gonna find yourself collapsed, you know, in the middle of the you know, of the revolution, you know, and how effective are you going to be in that moment, you know? Not very.
Yeah. And the truth is there's a lot of different skills. There's a million different skills needed to make all this happen. And none of us has all of them. And we really need to work with each other and hand off to each other and benefit from each other. And so when you got a movement like that, then you can take a break and you can stand on the sideline and breathe deep and then come back in with fresh insight about what the next step is. Yeah. Yeah. So there's change at all different levels that I think all of us have been active in, right? There's Rochester, there's national, there's state. So let me take your temperature. How are you feeling about the different layers of movements that you're involved in at this point in time? What are the signs of hope that really are inspiring you, and what feels like a black pit of despair that you don't like to think about?
So for me, I sometimes get people put loyalty before common sense sometimes. You know, we can't I really like Reenah, but just because Reenah say, if Reenah say the sun is green, I'm not gonna agree with it. I'm not gonna agree with it. I'm just not gonna do it. And this this community, I've been telling people, in my opinion, they got people, and I hate to slander anybody, but they got people around here who still will argue with you about R. Kelly. They still will argue about and the evidence is like overwhelming. It's overwhelmingly ridiculous against him, and yet you have people who will defend him. And that list goes on and on. And that's what we need to get away from. We need to be, sometimes we need to just take the blinders off that we put on and just be honest, man. And that's all I'm not asking for people not to forgive anybody. Let's be honest. Let's have honest conversations. And then maybe the best person win. But let's have an honest conversation. Over the last previous 4 years, I've seen some crazy statements made that I never thought I would have heard. Alternate truths, alternative, you know, stuff like that. Come on. We can't just be saying anything. That's all. And with that, that's what bothers me.
And what makes you hopeful, Ricardo? I'm interested.
What makes me hopeful is the youth in this country. In this country, I'm telling you, when I went out there to Ferguson during the, I went out there immediately. I went out there immediately to Ferguson when it happened, because I could. And I stayed out there a long, long time. But the youth showed me, they made me be humble. They made me realize that I did not know it all, that a whole lot of the ways that I did were futile, useless, and it was a new way of doing things. They weren't marching, they were dancing down the street, and they was doing it, they was taking over the streets effectively. And I just had to sit back and learn. And Fast forward, my daughter's in her crew, not just her. It is a bunch of amazing young folks in this town, a bunch of them, and they are amazing. They have endurance, way more endurance than I'm getting old, but even when I wasn't old, I didn't have some of the endurance that they have, and so I'm willing to listen, to let go, not be in the lead, you know, and me being able to do all that is what makes me hopeful. That's why I'm hopeful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I definitely would agree. I'm, seeing the youth in action, in ways I might have never even dreamed of being active. You know, seeing them, just so fearless and bold, but I'm also very much inspired by the connections that I see, with the continuum, you know what I mean? When I see that they are absolutely still very much influenced by the folks whose shoulders they stand upon, and and by the work of our ancestors and the acknowledgement of our ancestors. I'm very hopeful when I see that, and inspired by that. I'm inspired by what I see is as the ways in which some of us might work behind the scenes to make sure that they are okay, and protected, and and don't need any recognition for it. No, we don't have to get press behind it and those kind of things, but really just people. I'm so hopeful when I see folks working behind the scenes to do doing this work, as you see other folks stepping up and stepping out into the the limelight, or just onto the front lines, whatever it may be. I'm inspired the by what I see, what I experience as learning and growth, when I'm in this current movement, when I'm doing this work and I learn something new, when I or something um uh just it hits different, it lands different, and I am able to make a connection that I might have never made before. That makes me hopeful. It makes me know that I don't know everything, and that everything that is known right now isn't all there is to know. And that's very inspiring to me. I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm like, yes, let's go. What we gonna learn tomorrow, that we can apply. I'm inspired by seeing that honesty that you're talking about, Ricardo, but most importantly, seeing that translate into growth, and action, in our community, when folks get real, get honest, seeing that actually play out, and I'm also very much hopeful and inspired by bold moves made, when those bold moves are made, especially by our elected officials that are part of the old system, that is the system that really has kept so much of this, of the progress at bay, this system that has meant oppression and violence toward so many of the marginalized. But when I see folks make bold moves, even while they're in that system, see them pushing against those, those old ways of being, and risk everything, like that. Like when I see that, I'm also very much hopeful, because without that, I don't have much faith in the system. Without those, bold, truth tellers, and the ones who actually are like, will like activate themselves and step out on a limb, regardless of whether their, you know, colleagues in office agree or not. Like that shoot, that really that makes me feel like, all right, you know, the work that I'm doing out here, you know, I'm not out here alone, just, you know, taking all the risks, you know, some folks who have that, you know, that sort of cover of like being a part of a system that is a system, a powerful system, you know, like they actually are willing to take some of those risks too. So I'm saying that for a reason. I'm saying that to folks who are running, you know, for office right now, those who will end up elected, you know, on June 22nd, those who may end up holding their seats. Like that really is that's the new expectation for me. Like, it's like, you know, let me see what risks you taking, you know, let me see what, you know, what is, you know, what revolution looks like from the inside. If you really, you know, if that's what you're there to do, you know, you said all of that stuff, you know, you said all that stuff in your platform, you said all that stuff on this million flyers that I'm getting in my mailbox every day. You said all that stuff. So let me see you risk something to make it happen, you know. So that's my piece. And that
So-
makes me very
So
hopeful.
tell me somebody who you just saw recently take a risk like that made you feel inspired and hopeful. Who are you?
I mean, I see people taking I see these activists taking all the
Okay, but
risks.
you said the people in power, the office.
People in power taking risks like that. I haven't been impressed. That's my call to action right now, because
Okay, I thought you said you
not-
had seen some of that. That was
no,
me.
I'm saying, I am hopeful for it, you know, and I'm not going to say that I haven't ever seen it, you know, because that would be some sort of revisionist history, you know, because I want so much more for us, but I'm also not going to call anybody out or pat anybody on the back, because, you know, this is not the time for that. We are in a new time, and we're in a critical time. And so, you know, it's time to step up in a bigger way, you know. So that's what I'm gonna say.
So when we just talking about young people and you know, that being very exciting, and it is the hope for tomorrow, because there's so many things that I see older people have done so wrong, and a lot of older people. But the other interesting piece of it is, as an older person myself, learning how to kind of sit back and listen more. And Reenah was talking about listening, and that's something that, you know, someone like, you know, as a lawyer, people expect you to talk and lead sometimes and things like that. And really, it's important to learn to pull back and listen. And that's been part of my journey. And in terms of the concerns about different levels of government, or, you know, right now, I think on a national level, there was this letter that I shared with you, Barbara, about from a number of scholars at universities across the country that came out on June 1st. And it's about their absolute fear for the democracy in this country. And it's been imperfect. We certainly have not had a perfect government by any means, but it has, you know, it has had certain ideals. And right now they're talking about the absolute danger to our democracy. And I think when we're talking about voting, I think there's a real goal of having people feel disempowered and unengaged, so that they're not going to challenge all of these things that are happening on a national level. And we talked about social media. Social media can have some really positive benefits, but we also know that so many people have been influenced through really psychological operations and warfare by some players in the political arena, and now have, you know, Ricardo was talking about alternative facts. And so now people are much more willing to accept things that are absolutely crazy and ridiculously untrue. And they're willing to fight others over this. So that at a national level scares me. But young people give me hope. And I think that's one of the things that we have to really kind of double down and say, we're not going to let these folks who don't believe in facts and who think that we shouldn't have a right to vote and our votes shouldn't be counted, and you can just dispel with all of that by putting in, you know, these new laws, voter suppression laws in these states. We can't let that happen. We have to really, you know, say no, we're not going to do this, and dig in and become even more involved for those who haven't been. And if you've never been involved, at least take those first steps. At the state level, I see a lot of good things happening because there's a lot of criminal justice reform going on. Again, thing that, you know, I focus on, and reform in a way where it's recognizing that there have been such huge racial disparities and the laws are specifically intended to address some of that. On the local level, I worry, but I think we all have, different perspectives about what's going on locally. And I think there too, we want to be able to, as Ricardo was saying, pull off the blinders and make decisions based on history and facts that we've seen with various candidates or what they're saying, and not just, not just our own history of believing that we need to support the same person we've always supported, whoever that may be. We just have to kind of take cold, hard looks sometimes. So those are my state, local, and national concerns.
So one thing
And
that's
so
impressive.
I'd like to say,
Yeah, go ahead.
we keep talking about listening. Listening is very important, but we also keep talking about older folks. What I think older folks could do right now is be the storytelling. Our school system and every place, even some of our families are not really giving us history. So as an older person, that is one of the most useful things that we can do. We can talk about the history of voting, the history of oppression, the history of slavery, and the history of everything. But it has to come from the storytelling, because they don't got it in the books. There's too much stuff that's not in the books. And we don't want to have the young people rewriting history, doing everything or repeating everything over. So that's a useful way for us older folks to engage, is do some storytelling on the history tip.
Ricardo, can I ask you a question? When you're saying that, do you have a particular story that you're thinking of right now that you would want to share?
Yes, I always have a story.
I love that.
I always have a story to tell. I was in Ferguson, and I had told the young folks, I said, y'all need to slow down. We can't be doing this and going this way. I said, you wearing me out. And they had a chant going, we're young, we're strong, we're marching all night long. And they actually meant that, instead of it just being a chant. And so they told me, you don't have to march with us. You can just ride with us. Get in the car with the young ladies over there. And because we had cars that were marching, rallying with us. And so I got in the car and did something I never did. I rode. I acted like I was an old man. Sometimes you just have to be your real self in a crazy situation and let folks take care of you. And I let go of the lead. That was the biggest thing. I'm used to being out front. And I was able to just let go of the lead, man. And so for me, that's the story. Let go. It's a bunch of us in this city, right here in this community. Older folks. I ain't the only older folks person in this city. It's a bunch of us older folks. We need to just get out the way, maybe tell a few stories, and just support the youth. Just support the youth. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
So I've been thinking a lot about some of these voter suppression laws being passed by all the states like Georgia. And I'm thinking about some civil disobedience. They want to make it illegal to give water to people standing in line. I think a jail full of little old ladies from the League of Women Voters would be a beautiful thing. So I might be doing some road trips. So yeah, there's always new and beautiful ways to join the group. So I don't claim I was ever any leader for what they're going through, but I can sure support them and make them feel seen and supported. I mean, I can give them a sandwich. They need a sandwich after standing in line for hours. I can do that. Yeah. So
Yeah, we all have to find our way, we all have to find our way to, to contribute. And I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping that I'm creating space for with, or co-creating space for with our youth, is this idea of, your contribution is valid and valuable. And so, the more we can create space for contributions that, folks may not have considered valuable, in the past, like you said, water in a sandwich, shoot, we got whole street teams now, that came out of folks understanding like what their lane really is. Like, I'm going to feed the people. I'm going to be, organize those trailing cars that keep folks from, that keep our, the folks who are marching safe, because there's other ways to look at this, I think that's a critical role, and all of these roles are, but sometimes, you don't step out and find that out because you're thinking, oh, I have to do it this way. I'm supposed to, if I can't march, or if I don't get on the, the megaphone, I'm not valuable, I'm not a part of this thing. And there's so many different ways, but we do have to find our way. And then those of us who are there, we have to create space for, and safety, and folks finding their way in that too.
Barbara, could you talk about how it has become easier to vote with the early vote and all of that?
Yeah, so there's so many ways to vote now. So on June 12th, the polls open up with early voting. And so let me just pull up the list. There's more sites than ever before, which is a wonderful thing. So there's voting every day from June 12th to June 20th. So that's over 2 weekends. And some days they open early and other days they open later and stay later. So some of the sites that, let me get the list up here. Some of the sites that are in the city, I'll mention in particular. I think we've got the Gant Community Center, the Boys and Girls Club, Sibley Square, Edgerton Rec Center, Norton Village Rec Center. These are new. And then we've got SUNY Empire State College, and then they're also spread all over the suburbs. But there's just more sites, both in the city and the suburbs, than there were before. And I think in the fall, they said that about 1/3 of votes were cast with early voting. The league actually has, now that you mention it, we've got 10,000 door hangers that we're trying to figure out how to get hung on doors in the next week or two. So if you have any teams of volunteers that want something to do, I can help you there.
Well, my Avenue Fellows love canvassing for all kinds of things. We do surveys in the community, asking people questions, talking about, vacant lots. So yeah, we'll take some of those.
Okay. Are you in the office tomorrow? Can I drop?
Tomorrow? Yes, I am. I'm there. I'm there tomorrow. I'll text you because folks start showing up when I say,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then there's also absentee voting. And once again, even though New York State doesn't have general no excuse absentee voting, they've extended because of the COVID pandemic. So anyone can get an absentee vote if they want to. You do have to put in your request, and you should do it soon if you want an absentee ballot. And you can do that by phone, by email, or online. So you can vote from the safety of your own home. And if you don't trust the mail, which frankly, I don't trust it as much as I used to, you can drop your ballot off at any of the early voting sites. You don't have to stand in any lines. And then on election day, you know, they're going to be open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., which is a heck of a long day for the poll workers, and we all appreciate. And I believe that they're going to have like full on, most of the voting sites in Monroe County are going to be active, even though, I mean, so the city obviously has some really hot primaries, but like where I live, all I've got is a judge primary, but all the polling places are going to be open all day for us to come and vote for our judge primaries. So yeah, it's easier than ever to vote. And I just hope people, so, I mean, the city's at such a critical point, you know, with especially the police questions drive me crazy. And we've got choices to be made. And so I looked up the numbers, and usually like the year after a presidential election is when we elect the mayor, and it's most of the actions in the primary, right? Because everyone's a Democrat in the city. The turnout is usually about 1/3 what it was in November to the June primary, which means people are giving away their power. They're sitting it out. They're not expressing their opinion, and they need to have an opinion right now. This is a crucial moment. So I'm really hoping turnout will be higher than usual.
I think it will. I think folks understand, how critical it is. I think it's, it's going to be critical for us to support that effort, because we know, even though we may not have, any of the aggressive or much of the aggressive voter suppression that happens here, there's still barriers and obstacles, that folks end up, that keep folks from the polls here. And so, we have to come together as a community and if, and get folks, make sure folks can get to the polls, make sure they understand, are able to do, because it is a lot to navigate. There's a lot of candidates, et cetera. So,
yeah. So one other thing I need to mention, to help you learn about the candidates, the league does an online voter guide. So if you go to vote411.org, it'll let you put in your address, and it'll show you all the races that you're eligible to vote in, list all the candidates. And we've invited them to answer some of our questions, and they can also give links to their websites and Facebook pages, et cetera. So that's a great resource for trying to find out who all these candidates are and help you narrow down the really considerable choices that you do have, because there's an amazing number of candidates. I also want to mention that in addition to those races I just talked about, the mayor and the city council and the school board, there's also primaries in many of the county ledge seats. And the county ledge this last year has just been amazing. Things have happened that I couldn't have imagined would happen. And so it's time to look at your county legislator and say, is this the way I want to be represented, and who's challenging them? And again, the Vote 411 can help you find out which ledge district you're in and who might be running for that seat, because most of the city will have a primary for that. And most of who wins the primary is going to win in November, because I don't think there's any Republicans who put in their petitions for the fall. There might be a few cases where a working family party endorsement will let someone who loses a primary persist into the November election, which might also happen at the mayoral level, right? We've got, they endorsed Malik Evans. So even if Lovely wins the primary, there's still going to be a contested election in November. So that'll be interesting. That's how Mayor Warren got in office, right? Because she won the primary, but Tom Richards had the Working Families Party. So he was still on the ballot in November. So we have seen this happen before, but he chose not to really pursue it. But I don't know what would happen this time around, because nothing seems to just be, you can't just assume because it happened before, it's going to happen this time. Okay, well, our time is just about up. So I want to thank all of you for being here. It's been delightful. And I can offer you all a special treat of a League of Women Voters membership if you'd like to take me up on that. And I'll be checking in with all of you afterwards. And we really thank you for helping us get the news out there to everyone that it's important to vote. This has been recorded and we'll be posting it on our YouTube. It's on our Facebook Live. And so feel free to share it with your friends, share it on your Facebook pages to help it get more looks.
Well, thanks for organizing it, Barbara.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and thank you to Reenah and Ricardo for all you shared today. It was really an honor being on with you.
You too, Jill.
Get out and vote, folks.
Okay. Good night, everybody.